Welcome to another episode of Kitchen Sink Dharma. And today I want to offer a perspective on one of the core teachings in Buddhism. It's usually referred to as the Four Noble Truths. And it's quite important to say it's just a perspective. And there are other perspectives on this, other teachings on this that you'll hear from different people. The Four Noble Truths were the subject of the first sermon that the Buddha was said to have given. And it said that he offered this first teaching to 5 people, 5 spiritual seekers, or 5 men who'd previously been his companions. And as a result of listening to this discourse on the Four Noble Truths, which took place in the deer park near Varanasi in India, all 5 of them became his first followers. And he talked about stress and suffering. And the word is dukkha in the language of early scriptures in Pali. The word dukkha describes a whole spectrum of suffering, including unease and unsatisfactoriness, misery, anguish, not getting what you want and getting what you don't want. And the traditional way to look at this first teaching is as a medical analogy. So the first truth is that stress and suffering is the disease, if you like. The second one is that craving is the cause of the disease, it's the origin of the disease. Then the third truth is that there's an end to the disease. And the fourth truth is the cure for the disease is the Eightfold Path, which is the Buddhist teaching on how to live in the world, basically. Now, a common understanding within Buddhism is that if you stop craving, if you can eliminate desire, then that's the problem solved. There won't be any more stress and suffering. There won't be any more dukkha. And that doesn't entirely make sense to me. And there are other ways of looking at this. So the most common translation that says craving is the origin of suffering isn't quite accurate. The word samudaya doesn't actually mean origin or cause. It just means the arising or the appearance. So it's too simple to say that craving and desire causes stress and suffering. It's maybe more accurate to say that it comes into existence alongside it. It's a two-way thing. So when we're not feeling very satisfied, when we're feeling stressed, it makes us crave things. We crave for things to be different to how they are. And equally, when we're craving, it causes us dissatisfaction and stress. So there's a two-way thing going on here. And at the end of the discourse, one of the 5 people that were there, called Kondana, was said to have said, whatever arises ceases. Whatever arises ceases. And the Buddha praised him. He basically said, yeah, Kondana gets it, he knows. And that statement at the end of the first discourse, whatever arises ceases, is about craving and desire. So what arises is desire. What ceases is desire. So in other words, desire is going to happen. And if you leave it to its own devices, it's just going to disappear of its own accord. And that's what it means to be free, to see these reactions just as being impersonal. So desire, dissatisfaction are going to come up, but they fade away if we let them. And that fading away is freedom. So dissatisfaction and desire are taken very seriously in Buddhist teachings. But it can be very easy to fall into a bit of a trap. We can easily end up making ourselves feel worse because we feel desire. And it's important to understand that what we're talking about here is a very natural facet of our humanity. This is a capacity that everybody, all beings share in one way or another. And it's an important one too. We couldn't exist without desire. We're not actually practicing in order to eliminate suffering altogether. In fact, we're not even practicing to eliminate desire, because these things can't be eliminated. They're the product of millions of years of evolution. And they're built into the limbic system in the brain. And also a lot of what the Buddha talked about when he defined suffering, it's not stuff that we can sidestep. It isn't optional. It's things like aging and sickness and death. These things happen to all of us. And we don't get our own way, or we lose what's dear to us, or we feel anxious or depressed, and we don't really understand why. And that's just life. That's reality for all of us. Things change. Things change in our lives, and we can't always control them. So even if there's a great deal of joy in our lives, it can never be painless. We can never be free of dissatisfaction. But a lot of our suffering, a lot of our dukkha, is optional. Particularly the suffering that arises when we're reacting to our reactions. So it's the voice that says, I shouldn't be feeling like this. And especially when we get into a whole kind of loop of obsessive thinking. In fact, an awful lot of our suffering and misery falls under this category. It's the layer of extra suffering that we add to our experience. So a certain amount of desire is going to arise. It's always going to arise, but we have a choice. We can react to it, we can cling to it, we can obsess about it, or we can just let it in and let it out again. And whilst desire can be painful, it will actually fade away if we let it, especially if we're mindful of it. The problem is all of this can become rather repetitive. It can become a habit pattern when obsessions and fantasies and craving take hold. They become self-reinforcing. So craving and agitation trigger impatience, and impatience triggers craving and agitation. And it's like a whole pattern. It's a pattern of dissociation. It's a constant leaning away from the present moment into the next moment. And we live as if the world is just getting in our way. So when we see the world through the whole lens of craving and desire, we really believe it's got the power to make us happy. And it actually doesn't. But on the other hand, if we're willing to embrace the ups and downs, the flow of existence, that leads to the falling away of reactivity. And if we continue to practice this, if we embed it, then we're looking at a life that's not actually led by reactivity. So it's not about ensuring that craving and aversion don't arise. It's about being able to meet them without a whole of extra layers of suffering. And we can learn to do this. We can learn to do this over time. Because deep within us, we already possess that capacity. We have the potential to be truly content and happy in the present moment. Inside each one of us is this great well of happiness and contentment. It's an ocean of happiness. And outer conditions are really just a pale reflection of that capacity that's inside us. So the moments when we're not reacting, when craving and desire are perhaps allowed to arise and then just fade away, those moments are like a door, they're like a gateway to the true sense of peace that we can experience. So we tend to think that a particular thing, an outer experience, an external circumstance, something will make us happy and complete. And that makes us crave, that gets us taken over by desire. So if only I could get that job, or that home, or that car, that relationship, the holiday, nice pair of shoes or whatever, then my life will be complete. And we keep going round and round and round and round with this desire. And in all that craving and desire, we never get there. We never get there. We just neglect our inner resources. We just forget that we can connect with our own being. And we can connect with the peace that's there already. And I want to be clear, there's nothing actually wrong with pleasure. There's nothing wrong with things that feel good. Again, it's just part of the fabric of our experience. And we can still engage with the world. We can still enjoy what's lovely in the world. It's possible to enjoy pleasant experiences without creating discontent with our imagination. So with a mind that isn't perturbed, a mind that's calm, we can enjoy our experience without craving. It's just that outer conditions don't have to be perfect for us to enjoy peace of mind. Because our natural state is one of ease and peace. We're fundamentally happy beings. We just experience a lot of unhappiness sometimes. And discontent is natural. As I said, it's built into us. It's going to happen. It's going to arise at times. There's nothing wrong with that. Discontent actually has a role. It can be useful. But a lot of the time when there's no need for discontent, we just create it anyway. There's no reason for us not to spend most of our time feeling quite peaceful. And I want to talk briefly about why kindness and compassion towards ourselves is so important here. One of the most pronounced views around ourselves is the view that we're not good enough. It's very common for us to carry around a sense of lack. And this generates craving. It generates possessiveness and insecurity and desire, and we try and substantiate ourselves. We try and fill ourselves up. And when that fails, we're often too caught up to notice because we're just into the next pursuit. And all of this ties us up to a sense that our well-being depends on being able to satisfy our desires. And it doesn't. It really, really doesn't. And you can't just will yourself out of craving and desire. This isn't just a matter of willpower. You can cultivate a way of living in this world that gradually frees you up, so that when desire arises, it doesn't stick. It just falls away quite easily by itself. So the cycles of craving and dissatisfaction, they make us go round and round in circles. We call it samsara, the endless cycle. It gets us stuck. It really sabotages our intentions. It takes power away from us and it hands it over to external conditions. So I grew up with a deeply held belief that feeling good was the most important thing. It's essential to me being okay. And of course, unfortunately, in common with everyone else, my life consists of moments that feel good and moments that don't. But I grew up with deeply embedded beliefs around this, around money and sufficiency and self-worth. And I grew up with beliefs around safety and security. And all of these things created longing, created desire for things to be different. And these beliefs are basically, they're the fuel in the tank when it comes to craving. So the belief that we're not good enough keeps us going round and round and round in circles, and again, that sense of insufficiency isn't something you can shake off in an instant, just through a simple act of will. It takes time, it takes a while. And our culture teaches us that we shouldn't love ourselves. We tend to have a certain resistance to the idea that we can offer ourselves kindness and friendliness. But this is essential, it's an essential element of the practice if we're going to loosen the grip of craving and desire. And when we talk about cultivating kindness and compassion and friendliness towards ourselves, this isn't a warm fuzzy add-on to our meditation practice. It's not self-indulgent, it's essential. If you're serious about waking up, don't skip this part of it, don't skate over it. And if you don't find it easy, just work with it. Bring all the creativity you can to it. And if there are blockages there to loving yourself, find them and work with them. I promise you, this isn't an exercise in self-indulgence. It's not a form of narcissism. This is the important work. I really believe that this is the single biggest thing that we can do, loving ourselves so that we can observe our mistakes and imperfections without letting them define us. That's how we'll grow and learn. Not by cursing at our lives and wishing we were better people. But loving us is the soil in which we can cultivate equanimity, tolerance, generosity, and it's the basis for an inner sense of sufficiency. There's a Zen story about the fish that spends its whole life swimming through the oceans in search of water. And that's us. This whole sea of happiness is right there. We're right in the midst of it, but it's hard to see the implications of what that means. And it can be hard to see because it leads us to having to let go of things that we're attached to. It requires us to open up the whole space of mindful awareness and take it as the basis for our lives. Not stuff, not things that we crave and desire, but just the whole space of mindful awareness, just the whole capacity for happiness in the present moment. So thanks for listening. Hope to see you next time.